So, welcome back from break. Tonight, by design, for our presenters on tonight, as we've been talking about connection, it's important for me to share a little bit about my connection with these three individuals. And I know I already introduced both Tiffany and Helu, but in 2018, where I was working, the grant that I was on ended. So when that grant ended, I didn't have a job, y'all. And yeah, what am I going to do? So I said, I'm going to step out here and do my own thing. I really like this training thing. In order for us to be a core trainer, we teach some national curriculums, the main one being that from CCAR, which is the Connecticut Community of Addiction Recovery, who provides national trainings. We need to have at least two core trainers. So I called on Helu, what we gonna do? And you know what, without hesitation, he jumped up and said, well, you got one, I'm with you. So I was able to use his credentials sort of to meet that requirement. And then for now that we're out here, we don't have much money, but my sister got a grant, Tiffany Scott, for the Maryland Peer Advisory Council. And without a hesitation, she said, we're going to add some training into this grant. The grant was for advocacy, you all. But she said, you know what, we're going to advocate for more structured training within the recovery movement. And my selection is 3C. Now, we, again, we're just a brand new organization. I had a training history, but as a company, we hadn't trained nobody yet. But she signed on for, and I won't even, yeah, I'll go ahead and tell the amount. The amount started out with 75,000 for the grant, was increased to 100, and literally she says, I trust you with the process. So for the business side of impact and handling that money, she said, it's in your hands. I trust the receipts that you're coming through is right. She said, and I'm gonna go ahead and tell on her a little bit, Rev Vaile. She said, I don't even check them all the time, Tyrell. So it's great to have those friends who really, can trust you. And it's also great to be accountable. So on the flip side of that, you have to be accountable and reliable as well, that she can see that in me. And then last, I just want to talk a little bit about Rev Vaile, because when I started, again, I came from an organization where the leadership had assured me that you step out there, we're going to be there to support you. Literally a few days before I went to leave, the person who was in charge at the moment, at that time, said, well, I don't know what you're going to do, but I hope that you have enough, backing. And I didn't say, but my thought was, well, didn't you say you were going to support me and back me? But like that conversation never happened. But here is Reverend Vaile, who had attended some trainings of ours. At that point, didn't know me as well as she knows me now, said, well, what we will do is that we will take LTC under our wing. So the first $1,000, and it was some odd dollars out there for you to get the trade name, we're going to pay for it. When it came time for us to get registered with the certification board, LTC paid for it. And she did these things without asking for a dime from the first day that they paid to now, never having made a request, never having held over my head, well, when you were beginning, I did this, that, and the other. And on top of all of that, well, I am operating out of my house now, but that's because of COVID. Beautiful office space. She said, we're not doing anything with that third floor in their office building right now so that the space is yours. And when I tell you again, just that envelopment of love, Reverend Vaile, I'll always appreciate you for. Helu for stepping in, and Tiffany just for trusting me as we go through this process together. So I want you all to know that I have, again, that personal connection with these individuals who are sharing tonight. And then on tomorrow night, we're going to talk about them as well. But yeah, just having that connection and having that family, those friends who can support and love on us, I say is marvelous. It has helped me in my process. So now I'll read the formal introduction that we have here for Reverend Vaile, and then I will turn it over to her so that she'll have adequate time to share with you tonight. So Reverend Vaile Leonard is the founder and executive director of the Light of Truth Center, LTC. LTC has been providing recovery services for over 20 years. Under her superior leadership, Reverend Vaile has developed LTC into a full-service recovery organization that includes multi-level supportive housing options, treatment services, recovery educational programs, wellness programs, training, and meeting space facilities. She is a successful graduate of the Weinberg Fellows Program, a certified recovery trainer and specialist, and former Maryland certified volunteer with the Maryland Correctional Institute for Women. Please lend your ears for our keynote on tonight in the person of Reverend Vaile Leonard. Welcome, Reverend Vaile.
Thank you, everyone. And what an honor it is to be here tonight with all of you. I am absolutely so grateful. I want to thank the organization for thinking of me and for allowing me to share my experiences, my hopes, and my strengths with you this evening. We get to talk real talk about recovery. And anybody that knows me knows that I love recovery and I love to talk about recovery. I'm in long-term recovery. And so it is near and dear to my heart, especially when you have walked on the other side of midnight and God brings you out of the darkness into the light. It is an honor and a blessing. I'm humbled to be able to be here and share with you. One of the things that I want to talk about with recovery and make it very clear is that recovery is not a moral dilemma. It is absolutely not a moral failing, and it is not a matter of willpower. And so there are many conversations surrounding addiction, active addiction, overdose. There are few conversations that surround recovery. And so let's talk a little bit about that tonight and why that happens and how important that is, especially for the family. We do recover, and recovery is in fact possible. And so one of the things as a community is inundated with information about overdose and inundated with information about active addiction and substance use disorder. And on the flip side of that, there's very little information really for the family and the community around recovery. We were in a town hall meeting just recently, and we watched a presentation. It was probably about maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And all of the information presented was about overdose, the various types of drugs that were being used, how they were being used, numbers referencing 2019 and 2020. 21, we're at the highest level ever of overdose. However, there was little information about recovery or solutions directed towards recovery. And so it is time for us to begin to really have those kinds of conversations. First off, the family and the general community. If we are not providing information about recovery, the possibility of recovery, then it is hard for the community to accept and acknowledge and recognize that recovery is possible. For many, many years, movies, various medias, songs, writings have always talked about the addict or the alcoholic in a way that has created a wall of stigma. And so for those of us who are in long-term recovery, not only do we have to manage our own recovery, but we also have to manage the stigma associated with recovery. I'm so glad to see this type of conference, and especially coming from the church, because it has been my feeling for a while that the church has been quiet in this whole scenario. Always, it has been the church in our communities, it has always been the church that has been the spearhead of any movement. It has always been the church that has been the basis of our community development and our community moving forward. So to have a conference, a church conference that's talking about recovery, I am really, really encouraged. Now, there are a couple of conversations around addiction and active addiction. There's a conversation that believes that addiction is a dis-ease. There's a conversation that believes that addiction is a neural adaptive disorder. And there is yet another conversation that we rarely hear or people rarely speak of, and that is addiction as a soul's unfoldment, a soul's journey. For me, addiction clearly has been a soul's unfoldment. Everything that I do, everything that I am, all of my life and all of my affairs have been born and spearheaded out of this experience we call addiction. So let me talk to you a little bit about why they can say that addiction is a disease. A disease is developed by a team of medical professionals who have a prognosis and a diagnosis. And so you have to be able to demonstrate in a group of people that they have similar symptoms, that they have similar behaviors, and that they have similar outcomes. And if that can be proved in multiple groups of people in multiple ways, then the medical community then decides and acknowledges that as a dis-ease. A neural adaptive disorder is about the way the brain functions and the way we think. And so as we think, the brain fires off a little spark, and that spark ignites and touches with another spark within a brain, and an idea, a thought form is then developed. If we have a repetitive thought form, that then creates what we call an addiction. And you can see that it is not simply with a drug or with alcohols. It can be with food, it can be with shopping, it can be many things. It's the repetitive thought. I liken it to a field. And you know how you have a grassy field and people begin to walk across that lawn or walk across that field, and then there's the brown spot that then begins to develop from the repetitive walking back and forth, walking back and forth. Addiction is very much like that in the brain. And so just like with the field and just like the grass, the only way to heal it is to stop walking through it. And so for those of us who have addictions, it's the same way. The only thing to begin to heal that brain, that part of our brain, is abstinence, to stop using. However, abstinence is not recovery. Abstinence is simply the tip of the iceberg. It is the very beginning of the recovery process. Because when we take a look at the recovery process. The recovery process, and I'm going to make it personal for me, is a change of ideas, a change of attitude, a change of perspective, which then brings about a change of behavior. And so if I stop using and do nothing, I still have a challenge. I still have a challenge. So that real growth, that real change, that coming into, because addiction is threefold. It's not one, it's threefold. It's mind, body, and spirit. And so each portion, each part of addiction must be addressed in order for the whole person to be healed. The body has to be addressed, abstinence. The mind has to be addressed, information about recovery and learning about the disease of addiction. And then the spirit. There's a whole unfoldment. There's many of us, and I'm a 12-stepper, so I'm going to talk about that. I'm a 12-stepper. So in the 12-step process, there are spiritual principles associated with the step. With each step, there's a spiritual principle associated with it. And so as you work the step, you learn how to implement the spiritual principle in your life. That's what changes you. Using the principles of spirit, using the principles of the divine to then develop and change and alter your life, your thinking, your behavior. For families, it is very difficult to distinguish the difference between addictive behavior and addiction. I'll say that again. Very difficult for the family and the community in general to distinguish between addictive behavior and addiction. Addictive behavior is those behaviors that we develop over a period of time in order to support active addiction. All of the manipulation, all of the maneuvering, all of the things that happen day to day, those are addictive behaviors that are developed over a period of time. The disease of addiction is a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing. And so one of the things that I ask families to do, I talk to a lot of families, and one of the things I ask them to do is educate yourself about recovery. Take the time to educate yourself about recovery. Learn about recovery. There is no way you can support your loved one. There is no way that you can understand what your loved one is going through if you don't understand the disease of addiction and if you don't recognize that there is hope for recovery. Often when we talk about recovery and we talk about change, we talk about the stages of change, but there are also stages of recovery. Just like there are 5 stages of change, there are also 5 stages of recovery. And so as you begin to learn about recovery and learn the stages of recovery, those that we love and those that we support, we can identify what stage of recovery they're in and what they're going through. Those of us who provide services, when we are training, one of the things that we usually say in training is make sure that whatever you provide is stage appropriate. Don't talk to a person with 3 months clean as you would talk to someone that has 1 year clean or 2 years clean, because they don't know what you're talking about. Because they're not there yet. They haven't grown into that yet. So as you educate yourself, you'll be able to see where a person is, where your loved one is, where a family member is, or where a friend is, so that you can be able to be supportive. I wanted to make sure that this is a conversation and that it is interactive, because I want to have real talk about recovery, real talk about the stigma, and real talk about what we go through as we grow in our recovery process. So if you have questions as we're going through, you don't have to wait till the end. You could just put it in the chat. Tyrell will let me know, and we will address or answer any questions that you might have as we're moving forward. All right? All right. So SAMHSA a couple of years ago, and so there are a couple of writings here. William White is one of the authors that creates a lot of information for family, friends, and those of us who are in recovery. And William White made a statement once about how much data there is about overdose and how much data there is about addiction, active addiction. And he made the statement that you could fill a library with information and books about active addiction and about overdose, but you could probably only fill a couple of shelves about recovery. I'm not sure why we don't talk about recovery, because we really do recover. I'm not sure why we don't look to the solution rather than have the conversation continuously about the problem. I think that families get it. I think the community gets it. I think we understand how damaging and how powerful addiction can be. I think we get that. I think we get the devastation of alcoholism. I think we get that. I think that we recognize that while there's a pandemic going on, there's an epidemic also raging in our country at the same time. I think we get that. I would like to see us begin to move the conversation from all of that to the solution. What do? If in fact we do recover, then what? Now what? How do we move forward? How does the church support their congregation, those that are suffering in silence, sitting right in the congregation and afraid to let somebody know that they need help? What do? We in the community that must establish a movement. It's time. I acknowledge anybody that wants to maintain their anonymity. I'm fine with it. But as for me, I cannot be quiet. I can't be still. I can't sit down because God brought me too far not to talk about the glory and the goodness of the Lord to bring me out of that darkness into the light. And so some of us must begin to talk about recovery and that we do recover. It's a struggle for many of us. I remember early on when I first came into recovery, I didn't fit any paradigm. I didn't fit any program. And so those who were professionals, who were counselors, who were working to support me basically said, nothing we can do for you. We don't think you have the ability to recover. We don't think you have the strength. We don't think you have the honesty. We don't think that you can do what you need to do to recover. And it appeared as if they were correct because I had tried and failed and tried and failed and tried again and again and failed again and again. And so they said to me, the best you can hope for, the best, is to get on a methadone maintenance program and to be on that program for the rest of your life. And it would give you some semblance of normalcy. And I believed them. And I was on the methadone program for about 4 years before the Lord reached in, touched my heart, and let me know that there was something else that I had to do, that there was something other than this for me. And I was able to embark on a journey of recovery. But I didn't recover right then and there. I came off that program, and guess what? I went right back after 4 years. Clean, not one urine that was positive, came off and went straight back out. I didn't go back to the corner. I didn't go back to drugging, but I went back to drinking. And I drank for another 10 years. So when I tell my story, I usually say it takes me 10 years to get 1 year clean. But I'm grateful that today I have 29 years clean, coming up on 30 years, y'all. Coming up on 30 years. And that's why I'm filled. I'm filled and excited to be able to talk about recovery anytime, anywhere, because I know it's possible. Don't tell me what God won't do. Don't tell me that recovery is not possible. Don't tell me that you can be in the gutter one day, and God will raise you up the next day and stand you up so that you can speak out and let people know we do recover. Recovery is possible. But what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? How will we support our loved ones? How will we support the community? That's where I'm at with it right now. You know, that's why we have the programs that we have. You know, we have a program that's a continuum of care, not one piece, but a full continuum: housing, treatment, women's wholeness program, just every aspect of recovery, because recovery, as well as addiction, is multifaceted. We have really did a lot of people who were striving for recovery a disservice, because we only saw it from a very narrow lens. We only saw it from the substance use or the substance abuse, not recognizing that it was multifaceted. In order for a person to be successful in recovery, we had to address all those various facets. And so that's where we are today. When we look at the various stages of recovery, there's stabilization. From the beginning, I've got to get my footing. I've been transient. I've been on the street. I've lost my conscious contact with God, because God never leaves us. God never left me. When I think of the jackpots and the danger that I was in, I recognize that God never left me. I'm so grateful. But I had to stabilize. I had to get my footing so that I could just have a clear thought long enough to make that conscious contact and to begin to hear the teachings and the words of recovery. And once I stabilized and got my footing a little bit, I began to deepen my understanding of what recovery is by reading, going to meetings. You know, my spiritual foundation began to grow and unfold. The third stage is connectedness. I went from me to we. They say that self-centeredness is the core of our disease. I went from me. My friend always says, singing in the key of me. I went from singing in the key of me to we. Began to be connected to the church, connected to the community. I'm so grateful for my senior pastor. I'm telling, when I came into the church, I had 2 years clean. I came off the street, do a program to the church. I couldn't even sit in the congregation. One of the first things you lose in active addiction is your social skills. So I did not have the ability to have a conversation. I didn't want anybody to touch me. I had wall up, you know, so I was very argumentative. So the pastor had the idea of moving me out of the congregation, putting me in the audio department. And I stayed in the audio department for many years, but it allowed me to watch and learn and build those skills that I didn't have. And I didn't leave the audio department until I realized that I was hiding in plain sight. Once I recognized that I was hiding, I needed to step out and begin to grow and unfold. And so for me, addiction was challenging. It was difficult, but understand it was the best thing that ever happened to me. The best thing that ever happened to me, because it created a void, it created an opening for me, it created a light for me to be able to step into, to unfold into. And I am very clear, if I had not gone through that experience then, I would not be the person I am today, nor would I serve at the level that I serve today, and with the passion and intensity to which I serve. And so step 4 is integration. I began to integrate all aspects in my life, the 12-step program, the spiritual information, all of that, so that I could begin to grow and unfold and then share. So I could walk the talk, so to speak. You know, folks can come in and talk recovery real good, but can you walk the walk? And so this allowed me to walk the walk. And then finally, fulfillment. I live in a manner today which I just can't even describe. I am so blessed. I am so grateful. I am so on fire for God. I'm so on fire for recovery. I am so on fire for creating a recovery movement because it is long overdue. I have had enough of all of the stigma. I have had enough of all of the statistics about overdose and fentanyl and opioids and all of it. And I just want to talk about the possibilities and the glory and the grace and the goodness that a recovered life brings. So thank you for having me here this evening to share with you. Like I said, I'm just so grateful and I love recovery. I could just go on and on. So I will pause to see if there are any questions.
So we had one question that came up so far is, how do you help someone who has been in recovery for years let go of the guilt from the time they were using and stop letting people use that guilt against them?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. The stigma is real. And that stigma does create that scenario of shame and guilt. And it takes time, and that requires a healing. That is a deep trauma that it doesn't go away overnight. As we recover, as we work a recovery process, as we are supported by our loved ones in the community, that begins to heal, but it takes time for that to heal. It really does. It just doesn't go away. You can't just, you know, don't be shameful. No, I mean, there are people to this day, even with 29 years clean, who try to remind me of who I used to be. Well, I know who I am today, and I'm not that. Today, I wear no labels, zero, none, zip, nada for anybody. I know who I am. I am a divine expression of God. I know who I am. And if you can't recognize me as a spiritual being, then you don't know who I am. And that's all right with me, but I'm not wearing your label today. I'm the king's kid, heir to the kingdom of God. That's who I am, period.
Awesome. I had to put that quote in the in the chat box. I'm a divine expression of God. Our next question is, I've heard of the term rock bottom. What does that really mean to a person recovering from substance or alcohol use?
So rock bottom is a term that we generally use when we have just hit that place where we are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and we're sick and tired of ourselves. Usually family and friends can look at us and we go through experiences and they'll say something like, haven't you had enough? No, we don't have enough until we have enough. And that's our rock bottom. Rock bottom for everybody is different. You know, for someone, it may be a loss of a job. For someone, it may be the loss of a loved one. One of the things that brought me to my bottom was simply a look. I was acting out, being argumentative, acting like I had lost my mind. And I looked over and my daughter had this look on her face. I'll never forget it. She looked at me with this, why are you acting like that? What is wrong with you? And it just went through me. And that was my first bottom. And then I hit another bottom when I got lost in a neighborhood I grew up in. And I was so out of it, I could not find my way home in a neighborhood I grew up in. I was on Fulton. Anybody from Baltimore knows Fulton goes up and down. That's it. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up. That's it. I lived off of Fulton, Baker and Fulton. I could not, nothing looked familiar to me in the state of consciousness that I was in. And so I rode up and down for hours, passing Baker over and over again. You know, that kind of did it. That was craziness, to not be able to find my way home.
Thank you. And I'm now scanning, which I didn't do before, just to see if anybody's waving to speak a question. The next question, though, that's listed in the chat: when working the 12 steps, since you are a 12-stepper, do you expect and wait on a person to say they are sorry?
Ask me that again. Say that again.
As a 12-stepper,
yeah,
do you expect and wait on a person to say they are sorry?
I do not. I do not. As a 12-stepper, I do not. There's one of our steps, there's a process in our steps that talks about making a list of people that you have harmed and then making amends to those people. However, as we grow through this process, that takes time. I personally don't need the I'm sorry. And even for myself, I don't think I really said, even in a make amends, I don't think I said I'm sorry. However, the I'm sorry for me is the change of behavior. The I'm sorry for me was the consistent change, that because I know I broke my mama's heart. You know, my mom got 3 kids, all 3 of us addicted. So we know we broke my mama's heart. So I didn't need to say I'm sorry to her like that. I needed to say I was sorry every single day in everything I did, in my behavior, in staying clean every single day, in the change that she could see, not something that, I wanted her to see the change. I needed to be, that was my I'm sorry. So I don't wait for an I'm sorry. I am, especially when it comes to recovery, I am simply open to serve. I have no expectations of what a person should do or be or become. I simply am open to be here when they are ready to recover, when they are ready to share their experiences, so that I can be the light.
Awesome. And that was our final question from the chat. So if anybody has a question that they would like to raise, feel free to unmute yourself.
What can we do as a church, as an organization? What can we do to move the recovery movement forward? What can we do to allow people to meet people like you?
Mm-hmm.
Meet people like you who have really embraced the recovery rather than the stigma.
Yes. I think that one thing that I think is important for the church is to do exactly what you're doing right now, is to have these kinds of conferences. And once you have educated yourself, make a decision to create a space for people in recovery to be able to step forward without the shame and the guilt. Unfortunately, there are some, look, y'all, I just gotta be straight. So there are some pastors from the pulpit that just beat people up that are actively using. And so the real deal is to create safe space. If the church can create safe space, create opportunities like this, create venues like this, have the opportunity to address the congregation, address those who are challenged, who are fearful, who are afraid of losing your love and your respect, and let them know that this is a safe space. You can recover here. I think that is one of the things that's really important. And I would love to see the church have a voice. I have not heard the church stand up for those of us who are in recovery or those who are struggling. Somewhere there's got to be an ark. Somewhere there's got to be a safe haven. Someone has got to stand up and say, it's okay, baby, we got you. Come on, here's the place. If you can't find any place else to go to recover, come on over here. We're not going to judge you. We're not going to criticize you. We'll educate you. We'll support you. We'll be here for you so that you can unfold. And when you fall, we will pick you up without criticism or judgment.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, I'd love to see the church have a voice. I've been waiting for you.
I have a question.
Yes.
All right. So in the process of recovery yesterday, when we kicked off, when Elder Ty mentioned boundaries, making sure we have strong boundaries.
Yes.
When it comes to giving strong boundaries to someone who is on substance abuse or alcohol abuse or whatever they're abusing, how strong and how forceful should your boundaries be when it's, I guess what I'm saying is, how far do you go to where it's still loving, but it is not infringing upon yourself as well?
I think that's where the education comes in. That's where understanding recovery and addiction comes in. For me, I don't care what the problem is, love is always the answer. And so the boundaries are really for us to just be clear of what it is a person needs, but what we also need as we're supporting people. I often make the difference, and I think this might be helpful. I often make the difference between helping and serving. You see, because when you're helping, you have an expectation of change. You have an expectation of seeing a different behavior. But when you serve, it comes from a totally different place. It comes from a soul place where you're not determining what the person is doing and how they're changing or if they're changing, because for real, that's none of our business. That's between them and the God of their understanding. And so if we're going to serve from the perspective we're here, we're going to support you, we're going to educate you, we'll be here for you. The boundary for us is just recognizing the difference between that serving and helping. You know, because service always brings us to a different level of consciousness. That consciousness always tells us whether to step forward or be still, whether I'm speaking or God is speaking. If we are moving from that soul space, that service space, that space of love, it always guides us as to what to say, what not to say, when to say it, and who to say it to. Helping puts me in a consciousness that ego tells me, you shouldn't do that. They're gonna use you. You shouldn't say that. That ain't loving. Or I need to be tough. I need to show them some tough love. I'm not a proponent of tough love. I don't get tough along with the word love. Never did. Never did. So really, if you want to support a person to grow and change, it is just being the vehicle for them to have that safe space to do it, because God does all the work anyway. Just give them a space. Just give them enough love. You know, you'll know when to step back if you need to, really.
Thank you for your question. Anybody else?
Good question. That was a good question. I'm glad to hear the question about the church. I'm so glad to hear that. I've been waiting and praying for the church to stand up. I really have. We need you.
When you said that, Reverend Vaile, I thought about when you said I've been waiting. Bishop preached from Romans 8 on Sunday. And 8:22, before you get to 8:28, says, one translation says, the whole earth groans and travails, just waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God. So we've been waiting. The earth has been waiting for us to do our role and flow into this vein. And we're here. We're happy to.
I think the church is going to make a major difference. I really do. I mean, like I said, I'm just weary of the conversation. And those of you, Tyrell and Tiffany, you've heard me say it again. I'm so weary of the talk. We go to meetings all the time and people talk and they talk and they talk. They talk about change. They talk about what we're going to do. They talk about how we're going to do it. And they talk and they talk and they talk. And, here we are. Think about it. We have been dealing with this challenge in our community for years and years and years. This is nothing new. When do we take action?
I say now is the time.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome.
This is a perfect time. Families, mothers, grandmothers, aunts, sisters, brothers, fathers, grandfathers have suffered enough. Let us educate ourselves and prepare ourselves for a new day, for a new dawn, for a new light.
Awesome. And if I'm checking one more again for questions. Brother Sean left a comment that I think is noteworthy. Boundaries are put in place to protect yourself. However, often used to limit or restrict the behavior of others. So why am I really putting that boundaries in place? To keep myself?
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean, for saying that.
Awesome.
But we can learn together. The church can play a powerful role in moving the community forward and for raising the conversation. Because, there are a lot of people that don't want to have a conversation about recovery. So the church can be instrumental in changing the perspective from that just talking about people, how many people died. You go in front of the police stations, you got these huge signs, how many people died in Baltimore City and the county, how many people died and how many people overdosed. And oh my gosh, really? So from my faith tradition, we are taught what you think about, you bring about, and what you speak about continuously, you give power to. So if I'm going to talk about that, then what am I giving power to? Am I giving power to recovery, or am I giving power to overdose, addiction, and the continued behavior? So when do we stand in what we believe and speak into existence that change we wish to see? Somebody needs to be talking about recovery.
And Bishop-elect Juanita Gillis.
You posed a question that I was going to pose. Why do you think the church don't want to touch that and other subject matters? Well, since we're talking about this, why do you think the churches don't want to touch this subject? Because it's a very needful conversation that the churches need to have. So what are your thoughts? Why you think they're not doing it, because we're doing it? Why they're not?
I think it's just tradition. I think that traditionally there's certain subjects and certain things that just have been taboo. I think that the church has not been clear that we have the ability through our conversation and that which we stand on and believe to remove stigma. I think that the stigma of addiction, I think the stigma of so many social issues that are challenging, that have come up traditionally through the church, I think that some churches don't want to break form, you know, and really talk about it. But until we do, how are we meaningful? Until we talk about the real things, how are we really serving? You know, it's kind of like the difference between preaching at folk and, you know, opening our hearts and enveloping them so that they grow and unfold. And so that they get to understand and see the glory and the greatness of a God of their understanding. I think it's just tradition. I just think it's old. And I think nobody has really just taken a chance to step up and do it. That's why I said I'm so glad that you guys are having this conference. I haven't seen this before.
Thank you for that answer. Now, the second part of that, and I'm going to get out the way, is that seeing that we're getting a younger generation of pastors and leaders, do you think that's a possibility that now is going to now start changing, along with a lot of other things, because now we're having a younger generation?
Only if the church embraces it. Because if the church doesn't embrace it, they'll just bring them up in the same tradition and in the same way. You know, we've been taught, you know, I'm the thinker that thinks the thought that creates the thing. So as a church, what are we thinking? What are we creating? And do we have the courage, you know, to step up and create something new? You know, there are, I'm going to try to be sensitive when I say this, but there are challenges for the church and the law and nonprofit law. And those of us who know nonprofit law knows that the church has to be careful about what they speak about, because they could jeopardize their nonprofit status. And so that's a real issue.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
That's a real issue. We have to be able to do that in a way that does not jeopardize our status. That's real.
Thank you.
That's business.
Thank you. And yeah, and I never even thought about that, the legal side of things. So awesome. I'm going to reframe this into a question, but
Okay.
When living with loved ones who are in active addiction, it can take an emotional toll on us as families, as allies, as communities. How do we handle that? How do we deal with the self-care in those moments? Because we love our family members, so we want to shake them. I wanted to shake my sister. How do we deal with that emotional part that comes with it?
Okay, so first off, and that's why I said families, you know, I'm encouraging families to educate themselves, because addiction is a family disease. It does not simply affect the person who's using, but the entire family and every generation. You know, so there are supports for family members like Al-Anon, like Nar-Anon, and now like your church. You see how important this is, you know, that your church is addressing these recovery issues, because then you can also provide that support. But the thing to do is to be educated, to get support, to come to an understanding of where your loved one is, to understand where you are, what you can do and what you cannot do to support your loved ones. And, you know, sometimes when we begin to change and we begin to understand, we can support our loved ones in making different decisions. But just like we have to be healed from our addiction, just like it's threefold for us, you as a family member have to be healed as well. You've got to get some support as well. No way to do it by yourself. I'm sorry, it just isn't. And that's why so many families suffer, because they try to do it alone. They don't understand addiction. They don't understand their loved one. They don't know what to do or which way to go. You've got to get some support, really. Family has to get support, education and support.
Thank you. And Tiffany, just as a sidebar, I know here in Maryland, we have the Maryland Family Support, so families can go get the support they need. Is there something national for
So you
family.
have the Maryland Coalition of Families that is local, and then NAMI for national.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And of course, both 12 steps have every level. So like Al-Anon has, Nar-Anon, Al-Anon, but it also has Alateen, and it also has Alatat. So they have support groups for every level, for the family, for the children, for the little ones, because they're all affected. We're all affected, whether they can articulate it or not, So there are multiple different avenues.
Thank you. Minister Tam.
Hey. My other question is, how do you help someone, whether it's your spouse or it's a friend or someone or people that we may know are bitter and angry at those who, suffer from substance abuse and alcohol abuse and things like that? How do we help them? How do we kind of help them navigate where they can get help and get taught, because they are like, when the person's name is mentioned or something, they are angry and they're still harboring that.
Yep, education. Education is the beginning for me, always helping the family to understand. See, one of the reasons the family is angry is because they really think that it is bad behavior and that they could change if they really wanted to. And why don't they? Why don't they simply change? No, no, addiction is not like that. You don't just change. And so I think helping the family to understand first that it's not personal. It is not a personal attack. One of the things that like I said, my mom had 3 addicted kids. Her thing was, what did I do or what didn't I do? So it was guilt and anger around that, that hurt. Neither one of my parents, they never smoked, they never drank, they didn't party, they were just hardworking folk. They just could not fathom how all 3 of their children could be like this. So it was a lot of anger. And I think that my parents didn't begin to get over the anger until they were actively a part of me getting clean. And so they began to learn things about addiction, and they began to understand that it wasn't personal, that it wasn't a moral dilemma, that it wasn't simply about willpower. They began to understand that, and they learned why I continue to relapse. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that it takes a drug almost 2 years to get out of your body. You may detox in 30 days, but drugs lodge themselves in the fatty tissue in your body and dispense back into the body over a period of time. It's a term, and Sean, what do they call it? That's post-acute withdrawal, right? Is that correct?
Yes, post-acute withdrawal. Yeah.
Right.
So it lasts up from a year to a year and a half to 2 years for post-acute withdrawal.
Right. So families don't know that. So they can't understand, why would you do that again after all you went through, out of everything you took us through? Why would you do it again? That's why. That's why. And that's why I said education is the key. Education is the key. Please educate yourselves. You have no idea what a person in recovery is going through in order to grasp recovery and then maintain it. Families have no clue. No clue. I'm telling you, I told you I had 29 years clean. Recently, we went on a road trip in an area where I had been before, and I got triggered with 29 years clean. Do you know what a trigger is? That means I couldn't catch it. Not a stressor, I'm talking trigger. Automatic, like that. It's as if I had never stopped. Or like that, something triggered me. That smell, that air, had I not had the kind of information that I have, I could have used that day. Had I not have, God so fully in my recovery and support there that I could say to somebody, I felt like using. Families need to understand and really learn that it's more than just not using. So much more. So much more.
Awesome, thank you. And our final question or comment tonight is coming from Sean Pringle.
Hey, Sean, beloved.
I just wanted to comment again. I hearing a lot of questions about what could family members do or how could we be supported. And speaking from an individual who is in recovery, I can speak to some of the things that I wished I had. And I'll go out on a limb and speak for most people that's probably caught in their addiction, don't really want to be living the way that they are living. There's a shame and a guilt that comes with this. And then when we see that on the faces of our loved ones or receive that in the language or the treatment or the lack of empathy, that pushes an individual further away. And so to sort of, I guess, go back to the connection, you know, it's that connection, that love, that empathy, that's showing that I can understand, and with the education piece of learning all the things that we just discussed. But when the family members, you know, look at you with this judgment and this dread, that precipitates a feeling that causes an individual to want to numb and want to go away in continuation. But if that, of course, those are healthy boundaries that are put in place to protect the individual, but just the showing of love and support and empathy and understanding that this was not a choice. This is not a moral dilemma. This is something that I do not wake up or wish that I could continuously do. And once a family member understands that and be able to show that empathy and strictly say, you know, I love you, I'm here for you when you're ready, you know, those little things of support will begin to remind an individual of what once was or what is to be. And it took that for me, for someone to just simply stop. And I don't want to say just stop, but just simply showing that there was some care, there was some understanding, and there was some help. Because often there were times when I did not know what to do, didn't know how to go about even doing these things. And then I knew if I came and spoke to someone who did not understand then what I was going through, I would be punished emotionally or made to feel a particular way. And so just the support and education and empathy and lack of judgment, and that language is such a precursor to all things. And yeah, I don't want to go on because I can go on forever, but when the individual spoke about that angry feeling, underneath of that feeling is an underlying feeling, and underneath of anger is usually pain. There's some pain and there's some fear underneath of there. And so that individual that's trying to come to terms with their anger can now start to address the fear that it is, the pain that they feel. I am a proponent of mental health. I am a proponent of education. And so all those things in combination with support can now begin to remind the individual what is to be or what was, and can also start to help a person who needs that support.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Sean.
Awesome, thank you, thank you. So Reverend Vaile, I am gonna let you have then the last word, and then we'll make an announcement and then dismiss. But with that, Constance, as you were talking about education, Constance wrote in the chat box, which we talk about sometimes in our group, but a lot of people don't know. But the age when the individual, normally, the age that the person started using is the age that they are at emotionally. Would you speak to that, and then your final comments?
Sure. So that's true. Most people don't recognize that, especially family. But if a person picks up a drug when they're 12 years old or 15 years old, and they're standing before you as a 35-year-old or 40-year-old, that's not who you're dealing with. You're dealing with that person that's 12 or 15 years old. because emotionally, once we pick up emotionally, we cease to kind of grow and unfold. And so a lot of people, you know, we serve women, and you'd be shocked. Sometimes we're just listening and it sounds like we've got a house full of teenagers or preteens, you know, and that's because that's where they are emotionally. And so we have to be stage appropriate and recognize that we're dealing with a bunch of kids in there, a bunch of teenagers, and manage it as such. I've got a good example too of the ladies who was arguing, and one of our light keepers, that's what we call our volunteers, was on the phone running a group, and they started to argue and she didn't intervene. And I said, well, why didn't you intervene? She said, well, they're adults. And I said, did you not recognize that there were two kids? They were arguing like two little girls. What would you have done if you had two young children arguing? She said, well, I would have intervened. I said, that's right. You know, and so that's why I said education for me is just the key. There's so many different aspects of this and so much to learn in order for us to be supportive, but also to give ourselves some peace and some understanding. We have a raised hand, Tyrell, is that?
Yeah, it looked like we had one more hand that slid up.
Okay.
iPhone 13.
Yeah. Hi, Elder. It's Deacon Laverne. I'm so glad that you actually brought that out, because when you're dealing with your children, you have to deal with them while they're there. And I think that the problem that most of us have is that we don't realize that we're dealing with that where that person was when they started using, and we focus more on the adult part, and that's what frustrates us, because we feel that as an adult that they should know better and they should do better and this, that, and the third, and not, you know, and not focus on where they are. So I thank you for that. That was definitely a light bulb moment.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for sharing, Deacon Laverne. I'm like, I know who did the iPhone, and that I couldn't remember again. So thank you. All right. So anything else, Reverend Vaile?
Nope, just thank you all for your questions and your comments. I am very hopeful that as a church family, you will move forward with a recovery ministry. And I'm very hopeful that you will create a safe space for people, for family members to share their pain, and a safe space for others to recover.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So here in Maryland, we've been talking about building up that faith-based community, but we decided we're not going to have our 300 meetings to get it started. We're just going to do it. So I appreciate Bishop allowing us, both Bishop Pulley and Bishop Hector, allowing us to have this space to have the conversation, and Reverend Vaile for coming and speaking to us so powerfully in reference to this important topic. So thank you, Reverend Vaile, and again, thank Bishop Hector and Bishop Pulley for this space to do so. So I just want to remind everyone that we will be meeting again tomorrow night for our final evening together. So 7 o'clock. So 7 o'clock tomorrow, especially for those who are not in our same time zone. We're trying to be mindful of you. But so we'll be starting tomorrow evening at 7. We will be available and have the room open by 6:45. And yep. And you know what? And I'll make sure that everyone has the presenters' information and everything as we're going forward. So I told you all about these 3 awesome people who presented this evening. So while we were exchanging, while Reverend Vaile was sharing, Tiffany Scott sent me a message in the chat box. So we'll probably shoot for early part of next year. like I said, Impact has some funds, and one of the funding sources, or from that funding source, we offer what we call is Recovery Coaching Basics. So it's a one-day seminar. It's a national seminar that's offered by CCAR, and she will be extending that to you all here. So we last year we did about 3 or 4 for the faith-based community. We'll have that offering for you all here who want to participate. That's more information to come. So again, thank you all for sharing tonight. On last night, our spiritual father in the person of Bishop Sam Zimmerman closed us out. So I would ask tonight, I love having great parents in the Lord. My spiritual mother in the person of Bishop Dr. Paulette Zimmerman would offer our benediction for the evening.
Tyrell, may I ask one thing?
Yes.
Anyone who has a loved one that is actively using, if you would provide their information, we have a 8 a.m. prayer call every morning. We will include them in our prayer and include the family if you'd like.
Yes. So if you all get that to me, I can make sure that it's added to that 8 a.m. Call every morning. One second, Bishop, I totally forgot. Thank you, Constance, for reminding me. So tomorrow is Giving Tuesday. So I will place the link probably in our Facebook link. So as a nonprofit, you heard me talk about grants and things of that nature. So we are going to be doing a push for some fundraising, and I haven't done so since I started in 2018. So this will be the first, but starting tomorrow for Giving Tuesday, and we're going to probably go through January 11th, 1/11. Those who know why that date is important, in order for you to support the work that we do on an ongoing basis. We appreciate you. Thank you for the reminder, Constance. Go ahead, Bishop Zimmerman.
God bless you. Thank you for an awesome, awesome presentation. Let us just settle ourselves as we prepare for the close of this evening. Gracious God, we thank you and we praise you for all that has been said and done today. We pray, God, that as we enter a new dimension, God, a new dimension in recovery, that you'll speak into our very being. Order our steps, God. Take us to the place where we need to be so we can do better, God, and we can move forward. It is in the name and in the power of our Lord and Savior that we do say amen and thank God.
Amen and thank God. God bless you all. Have a fabulous evening, and we will see you here tomorrow evening at 7 p.m.
Have a good night, everyone.